Stop. If your energy has been declining despite doing everything right, eating reasonably, getting to bed at a decent hour, staying as active as you can, what you're about to hear will either make you frustrated that nobody told you sooner, or finally give you the answer you've been looking for. Because here's what the medical system doesn't routinely tell you. There is a difference between normal aging and accelerated aging. And that difference is not just about genetics or lifestyle. It comes down to specific biological processes happening inside your cells. Processes that have very clear, measurable warning signs. Most people miss those signs. Not because they're not paying attention, but because they've been told by their doctors, by the culture around them, that feeling tired, stiff, foggy, and slower is just what getting older feels like. It isn't. Not all of it. In this video, you're going to see 6 signs that your body's aging clock may be running faster than your actual age. And then just as importantly, you're going to learn about the 3 specific nutrients that research has consistently linked to slowing that clock down. Most people have never heard this connection explained. Their doctors haven't brought it up. And yet the science behind it has been in peer-reviewed journals for over a decade. Stay with this video to the end. Because the 6th sign is the one that gets dismissed most often, and it may be the most telling of all. Here is something that rarely gets explained in a routine doctor's appointment. There are 2 completely different clocks measuring your age at any given moment. The first is your chronological age, the number on your birthday cake. The second is your biological age, the actual rate at which your cells are wearing down, your inflammation is building, and your body's repair systems are losing efficiency. Those 2 numbers are not always the same. There are people at 65 whose bodies function like they're 50, and there are people at 55 whose cellular biology looks decades older. The difference isn't purely luck, and it isn't entirely genetics. It's driven by a process called accelerated cellular aging, and it leaves very specific footprints. The problem is that the medical system isn't designed to catch it early. Standard annual checkups test for disease. They don't measure the speed of your biological clock. They don't check oxidative stress levels. They don't assess whether your cells have the specific nutrients they need to repair themselves efficiently during sleep. That's not a failure of individual doctors. It's a structural gap in how medicine is built reactive, not preventive. By the time the signs become undeniable, the process has usually been running quietly for years. The 6 signs you're about to learn are the body's way of communicating that something has shifted, that the balance between cellular damage and cellular repair has tipped in the wrong direction. And the 3 nutrients that follow aren't guesswork. They're the specific compounds that researchers have identified as most central to keeping that balance in check. Make sure you stay for sign #6. It's the one that almost everyone brushes off as cosmetic or coincidental. It's neither. If this kind of calm, research-backed health information is useful to you, subscribe to our channel and hit the bell. New videos go out every week, and every one is built around giving you the kind of information that actually changes how you feel day to day. And in the comments, type your age and tell us how many of these 6 signs you recognize by the end of the video. It helps us understand exactly what to cover next. Before we get into the 6 signs, there's a small piece of biology that makes everything else make sense. Inside virtually every cell in your body, there are structures called mitochondria. These are the cell's power generators. They take the nutrients from the food you eat and convert them into usable energy, specifically a molecule called ATP, which powers every function your body performs. But here's what happens as part of that energy production process. It generates byproducts called reactive oxygen species. You may know them as free radicals. In a young, well-nourished body, free radicals are neutralized quickly by antioxidant compounds. The system stays balanced. But as we age, and particularly as certain key nutrients become depleted, free radical production begins to outpace neutralization. The balance tips. When that happens, those free radicals start damaging cell membranes, DNA, and the mitochondria themselves. This is called oxidative stress. It is one of the most thoroughly documented drivers of accelerated biological aging in the scientific literature. Running alongside oxidative stress is a second process, chronic low-grade inflammation. Not the acute inflammation you feel from a sprained ankle, but a silent, systemic, ongoing state that researchers have named inflammaging. It has been linked to cognitive decline, joint degeneration, cardiovascular disease, and metabolic dysfunction, and it produces no obvious symptoms until it has been running for years. Both of these processes, oxidative stress and chronic inflammation, are significantly regulated by three specific nutrients. When those nutrients are present, the system holds. When they're depleted through age, chronic stress, common medications, and the typical Western diet, the accelerated aging process takes over. Those three nutrients are coming. But first, the 6 signs. This is the sign that gets explained away more than any other. The mattress is blamed, stress is blamed, age is blamed, and sometimes those things play a role. But when someone sleeps 7, 8, even 9 hours and still wakes up feeling like the rest didn't happen, like the battery only charged to 40%, that's not just poor sleep hygiene. That's a cellular repair problem. Here's why. Sleep is the window during which the body runs its deepest maintenance cycle. Tissues repair, the brain clears metabolic waste through a system called the glymphatic network, and the mitochondria, those cellular power generators, recover and regenerate. But all of that requires specific raw materials. Chief among them is a compound called coenzyme Q10, or CoQ10. CoQ10 is what the mitochondria use to complete the final stage of energy production. Without adequate CoQ10, the repair process during sleep becomes inefficient. The maintenance cycle runs, but it can't finish what it starts. The problem is this. CoQ10 production in the body peaks in the 20s and declines steadily after that. By age 65, most people are producing significantly less than half what they were at their peak. And statins, among the most commonly prescribed medications for adults over 60, directly accelerate that depletion because they block the same biochemical pathway that produces CoQ10. Consider Robert, a 67 years old retired engineer who had been waking up exhausted every morning for nearly 4 years. He'd been tested for sleep apnea, thyroid dysfunction, anemia. Every result came back within the so-called normal range. No one had ever assessed his CoQ10 levels. Once that gap was identified and addressed, he reported within 6 weeks that it was the first time in years he'd woken before his alarm, feeling genuinely ready for the day. Persistent morning exhaustion, despite adequate sleep, is sign. Number 1, that cellular aging may be running ahead of your calendar age. And if that story felt familiar, stay with this, because sign number 2 is connected to the same biological thread. In fact, it might explain something that's been quietly unsettling you every morning. It happens in a matter of seconds. You stand up from the sofa, from the dinner table, from the side of the bed, and the room tilts. Your vision grays at the edges. You reach for something solid and wait for it to pass. This is called orthostatic hypotension, a rapid drop in blood pressure when the body changes position. And while it becomes more common with age, writing it off as simply getting older means missing what the body is actually communicating. Part of what governs that rapid cardiovascular adjustment is nitric oxide, a compound that signals blood vessels to dilate and contract in response to changing demand. Nitric oxide production depends on specific cofactors, including magnesium and vitamin K2, both of which are chronically low in the majority of adults over 60. When the vessels can't respond quickly enough to a sudden postural change, blood pools momentarily in the lower body. The brain receives less blood for a few seconds. That is the dizzy feeling. That is the graying vision. Beyond the discomfort, this matters for a very practical reason. Recurring orthostatic hypotension is a documented fall risk factor, and falls at this stage of life are not minor events. A fracture can trigger a cascade surgery, immobility, complications that permanently alters independence and quality of life. Regularly experiencing that dizzy moment when standing is the body signaling that its cardiovascular support system is running on depleted resources. The first 2 signs are rooted in the body, in cells and blood vessels. Sign number 3 moves somewhere more personal, and for many people, it's the one that quietly worries them the most. Walking into a room and forgetting why, reaching for a word mid-sentence and finding it simply isn't there, noticing that concentration takes more effort than it used to. These experiences are common. They're also frequently dismissed, labeled as stress, distraction, or the inevitable fog of aging. For some people, that dismissal delays them from understanding what's actually happening and what can be done about it. To be clear, this is not a discussion of dementia or Alzheimer's disease. This is about something that precedes any clinical threshold, a measurable dulling of cognitive efficiency that has specific biological causes. The brain is the body's most metabolically demanding organ. It consumes roughly 20% of total oxygen supply, which means it generates more oxidative byproducts than almost any other tissue. When antioxidant protection is compromised, particularly levels of glutathione, the body's master antioxidant neurons begin to degrade faster than they can be repaired. The myelin sheath, the protective coating around nerve fibers that allows signals to travel efficiently, also requires specific nutrients to maintain its integrity. When those nutrients run low, signal transmission slows. That is the word-finding difficulty. That is the brain fog. That is the feeling of thinking through static. Dorothy was 71, a retired teacher, sharp by any measure when she came in, certain she was developing dementia. She'd been forgetting appointments, losing her thread in conversations she used to lead effortlessly. Brain imaging was clear. Cognitive testing showed mild age-related decline, nothing diagnostic, but her nutrient levels told a different story. Every one of the 3 compounds discussed later in this video was significantly below optimal. Within 3 months of addressing those deficiencies, people in her life noticed the change before she did. She felt, as she put it, like herself again. Cognitive drift, a gradual loss of sharpness that wasn't there 5 years ago, is sign number 3, and it's not something that simply has to be accepted. Now we move from the nervous system to T joints, and signs number 4 surprises people because it doesn't feel like an aging sign. It feels like a plumbing issue, but the biology behind it reveals something important. Waking up stiff is not unusual. Most people over 60 experience some degree of morning stiffness. But when that stiffness consistently takes 30, 40, sometimes 60 minutes to resolve, when it doesn't ease with the first cup of coffee and a slow walk to the kitchen, that duration matters. Prolonged morning joint stiffness is a recognized clinical marker of systemic inflammation. Not localized injury inflammation, but the chronic, low-grade, body-wide inflammatory state described earlier as inflammaging. Here's the mechanism. The synovial fluid that lubricates joints becomes more viscous during periods of inactivity. In a well-regulated system, it resolves quickly once movement begins and body temperature rises. But when chronic systemic inflammation is present, the joint environment stays sensitized. The fluid stays thick. The stiffness lingers. The joints are not the source of the problem. They're the visible symptom of a systemic inflammatory environment that is quietly doing the same thing to blood vessels, brain tissue, and other organ systems, just without the obvious physical signal. The encouraging part of this sign is that systemic inflammation is one of the most nutritionally responsive biological processes studied in modern research. Specific compounds, omega-3 fatty acids in particular, have extensive peer-reviewed evidence demonstrating direct reduction of the inflammatory markers driving this pattern. The mechanisms are well understood and well documented. Persistent morning stiffness that takes a long time to ease is sign number 4, and it's the body waving a flag that deserves attention. Sign number 5 is one that often gets blamed on the wrong thing, and misattribution leads people down a path that doesn't address what's actually happening. This one is subtle, and it moves slowly enough that many people don't notice until it's been happening for a couple of years. The diet hasn't changed. Activity levels are roughly the same, and yet clothes are fitting differently. Getting up from a low chair requires a hand on the armrest now. Carrying things that used to be easy feels heavier. The arms look thinner. Grip strength has quietly declined. This is called sarcopenia, age-related muscle loss. And while there are hormonal contributors that are widely discussed, there is a less examined driver that accelerates the process significantly: mitochondrial dysfunction at the cellular level. The connection that rarely gets explained. When mitochondria are compromised by oxidative stress and CoQ10 depletion, muscle cells cannot generate enough energy to complete the anabolic repair cycle during rest. The muscles aren't being deliberately broken down. They simply lack the cellular energy to rebuild efficiently. Recovery from ordinary daily movement becomes incomplete. Tissue gradually diminishes. Alongside that energy failure, the chronic inflammatory environment described in sign number 4 directly interferes with muscle protein synthesis, the biological process by which muscles repair microdamage and grow. Systemic inflammation essentially jams the signal telling muscles to rebuild. So even with adequate protein intake, the body may not be utilizing it efficiently. This is why some people do everything correctly. They exercise, they eat well, they remain active and still feel like they're slowly losing ground. The inputs are right. The cellular environment receiving them is compromised. One sign remaining. And this is the one that gets dismissed most readily, often because it seems like a surface-level concern. It is anything but. Pay attention to this one. This sign gets written off as cosmetic, as vanity, as simply the visible part of aging that nobody can do much about. That framing misses what the skin is actually communicating. The skin is the body's fastest renewing major organ. Skin cells turn over approximately every 28 to 40 days. That rapid renewal makes the skin something remarkable. A live, continuously updating readout of how efficiently the body is regenerating at the cellular level. When collagen synthesis slows a process that depends on vitamin C, zinc, and specific amino acids, the skin loses structure and elasticity faster than chronological age alone would predict. When wound healing slows, a small cut that takes 2 weeks to close when it would have taken 5 days a decade ago, that is the body's cellular repair machinery signaling that it is running below capacity. But here is the critical point. The same cellular processes that drive accelerated skin aging are driving accelerated aging in blood vessels, brain tissue, heart muscle, and joints simultaneously. The skin is simply the one place those processes are visible. When skin has aged noticeably fast relative to peers, deep lines arriving early, poor elasticity, slow healing, increased fragility, that pattern consistently correlates with oxidative stress, elevated systemic inflammation, and the specific nutrient depletions covered next. The skin doesn't lie about what's happening below the surface. If that description sounds familiar, if the skin feels thinner, slower to heal, or aging faster than expected, that is sign. Number 6. And like everything else on this list, it's pointing toward the same 3 nutrients. Now let's look at what those are. Every sign just described the cellular energy failure, the oxidative stress, the systemic inflammation, the impaired repair and renewal traces back to the same 3 nutritional deficiencies. Understanding why these 3 specifically are so important is the difference between randomly supplementing and actually giving the body what it's been missing. Nutrient number 1. CoQ10 is the compound the mitochondria depend on to complete the final step of energy production, the electron transport chain. Without adequate CoQ10, that final step becomes inefficient. The cell produces less energy. Repair cycles during sleep become incomplete. Muscles lose the energy they need to rebuild. The cascade of consequences connects directly to signs number 1 and 5. The body produces CoQ10 naturally, but production peaks in the 20s and falls significantly through the 40s, 50s, and beyond. At 65, most people are generating a fraction of what they were at 25. Statins, one of the most widely prescribed drug classes for adults over 60, accelerate that depletion further because they block the very biochemical pathway that produces CoQ10. This is a documented pharmacological side effect that is rarely communicated clearly to patients. The form that matters most here is ubiquinol, the active, immediately usable form of CoQ10. Standard supplements often contain ubiquinone, which the body must first convert to ubiquinol. As we age, that conversion becomes less efficient. For adults over 50, ubiquinol is the form the research most consistently supports. Clinical studies demonstrating meaningful improvements in energy levels, cardiovascular function, and mitochondrial efficiency have typically used doses ranging from 100 to 300 milligrams daily. Anyone on statins or blood pressure medication should discuss specifics with their doctor before making changes. Nutrient number 2. Omega-3 fatty acids, specifically EPA and DHA, the long-chain forms found in cold water marine sources, are among the most extensively researched anti-inflammatory compounds in nutritional science. Unlike pharmaceutical anti-inflammatories, which suppress the inflammatory response bluntly and with significant side effects, omega-3s modulate inflammation. They help the body regulate its own inflammatory response back toward balance. The mechanism involves a group of compounds called specialized pro-resolving mediators, resolvins, protectins, and mersins, synthesized directly from EPA and DHA. These compounds don't merely reduce inflammation, they actively resolve it and help restore normal tissue function. This is why omega-3 research extends well beyond joint pain into cognitive preservation, cardiovascular protection, cellular membrane integrity, and muscle protein synthesis efficiency. The typical Western diet is heavily weighted toward omega-6 fatty acids found in vegetable oils, processed foods, and grain-fed animal products, and chronically low in omega-3 CES. That imbalance alone sustains the low-grade inflammatory environment described throughout this video. Correcting the ratio is one of the most impactful nutritional interventions supported by decades of peer-reviewed research. For a meaningful anti-inflammatory effect, research supports a combined EPA and DHA intake of around 2 to 3 grams daily. Food sources include fatty cold water fish, salmon, mackerel, sardines, herring. For supplementation, high-quality fish oil or algae-based omega-3 products. Algae is the original source. The fish obtain EPA and DHA from are the most commonly studied forms. Nutrient number 3. Magnesium participates in more than 300 enzymatic reactions in the human body. That list includes DNA repair, protein synthesis, cellular energy production, nerve signal transmission, cardiovascular regulation, and critically the activation of vitamin D. It is also a required cofactor for the synthesis of glutathione, the body's master antioxidant that protects neurons and other cells from oxidative damage. Research estimates that between 50 and 80% of adults over 60 are not obtaining adequate magnesium from diet alone. And here is the diagnostic gap that allows the deficiency to go undetected. Standard blood tests measure serum magnesium, the magnesium circulating in the bloodstream, not intracellular magnesium, which is where it actually functions. Serum levels can appear entirely normal, while cellular stores are significantly depleted. This is why magnesium deficiency is so consistently missed in routine screening. A magnesium deficiency contributes to accelerated cellular aging through multiple simultaneous pathways. It impairs the antioxidant defense system, disrupts sleep quality, and therefore cellular repair efficiency, elevates inflammatory cytokines, and impairs the cardiovascular regulation connected to sign number 2. Supplement form matters considerably here. Magnesium oxide, the most common and least expensive form found in grocery stores, has poor bioavailability and limited clinical relevance. The forms with the strongest absorption and research support for the issues discussed in this video are magnesium glycinate, magnesium malate, and for cognitive support specifically, magnesium L-threonate, which has demonstrated the ability to cross the blood-brain barrier and raise brain magnesium levels directly. Research has typically studied doses in the range of 200 to 400 milligrams daily. Here is what matters most about everything just covered. None of it is a verdict. Recognizing 3 or 4 or even all 6 of those signs doesn't mean decline is inevitable. It means the body has been sending a message, and now there's language to understand what it's been trying to say. The science of cellular aging has established something in recent decades that wasn't understood even 20 years ago. Biological aging is not fixed. It responds to inputs. The same processes that accelerate when nutrients are depleted will measurably slow when the right support is restored. This is not optimism. This is documented physiology. The 3 nutrients covered here, CoQ10, omega-3 fatty acids, and magnesium, are not exotic compounds. They don't require a prescription. They don't demand a complete lifestyle overhaul. What they require is giving the body the specific raw materials it has been running short of, and then allowing biology to do what it was designed to do. Independence in 5 years. Clarity in 10. The ability to stand up without effort, sleep, and actually recover, think without fighting through fog. Those outcomes are not determined by what happened in the past. They are being shaped right now by what the body has access to today. You are not behind. The body has simply been missing something, and now you know what. In the comments, type how many of the 6 signs you recognized. Just the number. It helps shape what gets covered in future videos, and it's genuinely useful to see what people are dealing with. If this video gave you information that your routine appointments haven't, please share it with a parent, a friend, a sibling who has been brushing off fatigue or stiffness or brain fog for years. Sometimes, the most important health shift starts with a conversation that begins with a video like this one. Subscribe and hit the bell so the next video finds you.